depending on where in the world you are. Thank you for joining us for today's Young Leaders Circle call. My name is Petra Freddy, and I'm a Senior Director for Business and Program Development with the Milken Institute Asia Center. Before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the struggles not only in the United States and Asia are facing at the moment, but nations around the world. One of the greatest assets of the Milken Institute is the platform we've developed and the extraordinary reach and access that we provide. It's our responsibility not only to highlight the issues we deem important, but to amplify our proposed solutions to the decision makers who can affect change. We all cannot miss this opportunity to do our part in the polarized world we live in. Today's session will provide us with an update on what's happening in Asia and what investment opportunities arise from the current dislocations. They say that the countries who entered the pandemics first will exit first, while the sectors who entered first will exit last. So that should be a good thing for the region where we live in. And the purpose of today's panel is to give you insights into how the investment landscape looks like and how to take advantage of it. Here in Singapore, as you can see on my background, the Marina Bay Sands, where the Milken Institute Asia Center is located, we just exited 8 weeks of a circuit breaker yesterday. So we're all relieved that for the first time, the local community transmissions were at 0 yesterday and look forward to gradual easing. We hope that things continue on this trajectory and we'll be able to meet again in person sooner than later. But in the meantime, let's continue our connections virtually. These calls are a fantastic opportunity to build relations with members across the world. It's something we always hear in your feedback you aspire to do more of. So let's take advantage of this whilst it lasts. Today's session, Investing in Asia, showcases the multitude of talents and geographies that the Singapore chapter represents. Our speakers will be Ilaria Chen, who's a group advisor for social impact investments at Grab. She's also a private investor, a board member for multiple charities, and an independent consultant. She's from Hong Kong, lives in Singapore, but currently is in a lockdown in San Francisco. We also have George He, who's a partner and head of private equity China at Ares Management and a founding team member of Ares China business. He's from Shanghai and is in Shanghai right now. And we have Aditya Swarup, a founding member and partner at Rakuten Ventures, the VC arm of a Japanese e-commerce Rakuten. He's from India and is currently based in Singapore. And moderating the conversation is our fellow ambassador, Curtis Chin, who's the former US ambassador to the Asia Development Bank. Curtis normally is based in Bangkok. He can frequently be found in Bali, but right now he's in Virginia. Couple of housekeeping points before we start. I want to quickly note that this conversation is being recorded, but it remains a private conversation. We will share the recording with all members shortly after the call. You will be muted throughout the call. If you're using a video, it might be a good idea to use the speaker view format to see each of our speakers. If you're not using a video, please try and dial in via video to make it more interactive. If you're having any technical difficulty, please email Madeleine Lieberberg. Madeleine, raise your hand so that they see you. Her email has been circulated in the confirmation email. You can also chat the host Ande via the chat icon or dial in. If you're dialed in, you can press *9 and someone will follow up with text. The last 15 minutes of this call are intended to be Q&A, so we hope to keep it interactive. So you can either email your questions to Andy or raise your hand via the raise hand function. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Curtis Chin. Ambassador, over to you.
No, thank you, Petra. On my screen, I'm looking at everyone's backgrounds. Some are like, your room, but I see a couple Singapores and beautiful leaves and a lot of dumplings behind Andy, and that says Din Tai Fung for those of you who can't read Chinese. So welcome to all. Really, this is actually my first of these that I was able to join you. I've watched one in the past. But yeah, it's a very troubling time, certainly here in the United States. As Petra said, I'm actually right now in Virginia, but right outside of Washington, D.C., which is only slowly opening up. But of course, all of you watching the news on top of the COVID situation, we of course have the terrible situation with protests and riots all going on. So clearly turbulent times here, but certainly around the world. The focus of this particular session, though, really focuses on COVID-19. And as Petra noted, having spread first in Asia, Asia hopefully will be the first to fully recover. But as we always say, even in these times of crises, there's opportunity. There's lessons that we can apply from the past and that we're learning right now. How I'm going to structure this is really go to our three key speakers. We'll all talk a little bit. And then they should also feel free to ask each other questions. But I'm going to begin by asking really all of them, but I'll start with George first. And as we think about the COVID-19 situation, how has it really impacted your business, or has it helped your business? Have you had to do things to mitigate what has gone on and what's gone on with your portfolio? And for each of our speakers, feel free also to share a little bit of info about your organization, your portfolio, or your own company, for those of us who are not in Asia that might not know your background so well. So George, let's start with you from Shanghai.
Sure. So a little bit of background for Aries in China. We're a growth capital investor. So we have 15 portfolio companies right now. So when COVID hit, right around Chinese New Year, we were actually all still at home with our families. Really, that's the time we started to watching for the positioning of each portfolio performance. I think at that time, everyone was very nervous. The main concern was running out of cash. So I think, a lot of defensive discussions with our founders and management teams. In China, in early February, when everything was essentially closed. So it doesn't matter if it's e-commerce business, which we have investment in, online pet food brand, or brick and mortar pediatrics clinic chain. So, in February, we really trying to estimate and project out for e-commerce, which you expect to be more resilient. Logistic was the main issue. Basically, all the courier service, which is the backbone of the e-commerce market in China, was shut until really resuming in early March. So we were, at the beginning, 10%, 20% of the capacity, where probably in mid-March, we're returning back to 80% capacity. However, the brick and mortar businesses, offline, doesn't matter if it's medical service or selling products, the government had a very strong mandate to keep those businesses closed. I think what you see in China is less voluntary compliance. It's more
George is actually frozen on my screen. Are others hearing George? I see a lot of shaking heads.
Curtis, why don't we move on to the next speaker, since
sure.
George
we'll get George back in there. Why don't you go to, George has focused on China. Earlier when we spoke, you talked about really the opportunity that continues in South Asia. Again, just a little bit, if you could share some background on your own Rakuten's portfolio, and how have you dealt with the COVID situation?
Absolutely. So by way of background, I'm a partner at Rakuten Ventures. Rakuten Ventures is the corporate venture capital arm of the Rakuten Group, which is Japan's largest e-commerce company and digital financial services platform. Our fund is an early and growth stage technology investment firm, which invests in companies around the world. We have a $300 million corpus. In the US, have been fortunate to partner with companies like Lyft and Pinterest early on in their journeys, and in Asia have worked with companies like Gojek and Carousel here in Singapore. So in terms of, so what was the question, Curtis?
So just as you think about the impact of COVID-19,
right.
What have you had to do, if anything, to mitigate the impact? Or actually have they benefited? Is it a mixed bag when you look at your portfolio and the impact of COVID-19 as it played out?
Okay, so first thing, I think the thing that's unique about COVID is that it's both a demand and a supply shock happening at the same time. And because of that, it's been very difficult to mitigate any of the damages that a lot of our companies have faced. So the first thing is that, and I think what makes it more complicated is that even as businesses are seeing customers come into their doors, as George was saying before he cut off, supply chains being locked has had a serious impact on a lot of these businesses. So overall, I think we've across our portfolio, you've seen companies in the travel sector. In some cases, their revenue has plummeted to zero. In other cases, where there was some physical interaction component, say with Carousel, for example, where it's a marketplace where people will buy and sell things to each other offline. As people are in lockdown, those sorts of activities obviously go down as well. The interesting thing, though, in terms of what the positive is that while you started to see a lot of companies take a knee-jerk reaction to COVID, where they started to, separate the words in the letters in their logo, and just encourage social distancing and just try to spread messages of hope. Sorry, I was hearing something. You've actually started to see companies that are taking advantage of the fact that people are spending more time online. And because people are spending more time online, it's a very unique opportunity to educate users about the benefits of your service and also educate them as to features of your service that may have otherwise been unknown to your users simply because they had limited interactions with the service before. So I think that's the main opportunity that COVID presents, is the opportunity to educate people about one's service and being creative in terms of not just having a knee-jerk reaction. Obviously, everyone wants messages of hope in this time, but also taking advantage of the fact that people are spending more time online. People are more flexible and with how they provision that time across different platforms. And if you kind of lean into that, and try and figure out a way to deepen and strengthen your communication with your users, you've started to see companies not only pick up revenue, but also maybe potentially even develop additional revenue streams in the process.
No, thank you. When we come back to you, and George will also come back to you, I don't know if you're on still, but we'll come back to you. One thing that we talked about kind of in our pre-call was also kind of the implications for the longer term structural changes that might come out of this. And so Adi, we come back to you. I'd love you to share some of those thoughts too. I wanted to go back to here in the US to our West Coast, to Ilaria, and all that has happened in Southeast Asia in particular with COVID, and what has it meant for Grab and your work there?
Sure. Yeah. So for anyone who's not familiar, Grab is Southeast Asia's largest tech company. We are valued at over $15 billion, founded 8 years ago. So kind of like Tencent, Alibaba, we're a super app platform. We started off with mobility. So we started off as the Uber of Southeast Asia, and then very quickly expanded into fintech. We're the largest payment wallet in Southeast Asia. We also have lending products. We have micro wealth management and insurance products as well. We have a food delivery arm. We also are the largest regionally in Southeast Asia. We have grocery delivery. We have logistics delivery. We also have an online healthcare platform that is a joint venture with Ping An Good Doctor that we've launched in Indonesia as well. So we operate in 339 cities in 8 countries. So basically anywhere, I would say, like south of Hong Kong on the map in Southeast Asia, we're there. Some stats is we have about 180 million downloads, more than 40 million monthly active users, putting us as #1 in the region. Now, that unfortunately also means that when there's a crisis like this, every area of what we're doing has been hit. And of course, as a tech company that has been fundraising to expand on our verticals that are not profitable yet, we have had a crazy few months. So maybe just a little bit, since I'm out of the 3 of us, I'm more with an operational portfolio company, just some trends to see what's going on on the ground, right? So we've definitely seen a decline in ride sharing because everyone's on lockdown. So volumes have really gone down. However, there's been a crazy strong delivery uptick, which also is obvious why, because everyone wants everything to be delivered to them, especially for us as food delivery, grocery, and parcel. So people literally don't want to touch things. And we have a concierge service that shuttles, packages, and any essentials. We also have essentials delivery. We also have medical supply delivery. We also have overnight pivoted to move up our services to help transport medical workers and to have public-private partnership with the governments in individual countries according to what they need. So what is some of the key things we see, right? Like, we are deemed essential by governments. And I would highlight that to the audience, is that I think this crisis has really drawn a clear line between what is consumer discretionary and consumer non-discretionary. And for us, which is mobility, food, healthcare, et cetera, it's essential. Hence, the strong demand is there, but it also highlights the supply constraint, right? Whether it is the number of skilled workers that could provide that service, or whether our tech infrastructure can respond overnight really quickly. I mean, in the US, even I've been here, Amazon couldn't really handle the volumes that is demanded of them when this whole thing happened. And so we definitely experienced that at Grab. I mean, to be honest, there were many days when we're just like, there's been system crash. There's been times when we're like, wow, how do we allocate drivers, deliverers, partners, merchants to respond to this huge need? I think operational wise, we see that there's a huge benefit to have a very integrated, diversified platform. Because, for example, Uber has been doing better than Lyft because they have their food business has been able to partially offset the dramatic reduction in transportation. For us in Southeast Asia, and I think overall in Asia, this theme of a super app to be able to have use cases and network effects and all of that has really been able to be helpful. So give you an example, right? Give you an example, over one night, we had to mobilize thousands of drivers, from being car drivers to food delivery drivers. We're very lucky that we're able to do that because we are one integrated company. But I think that it would be really tough if it's all siloed between different companies. I hear really loud typing from someone, so if you don't mind muting, that'd be awesome. Thank you. So, another trend is escalated digitization. In many ways, fintech or other products, e-commerce, it's still relatively not super high penetration in many areas in Asia, but this crisis has forced people to just have to use digital. So in many ways, this trend has really this crisis has forced a trend towards people adapting to try to use it. So I literally see like 70-year-old grandmas using food delivery app when usually they would rather go downstairs to pick up food themselves. So that is definitely a trend, an effect on us, but a trend to watch out for. And maybe I'll wrap up this point because we can revisit later. I personally, sitting on where I sit, I see the massive importance of focusing on products that help the masses. Because unlike the previous financial crisis, which were Wall Street housing market led, this is a Main Street SME humanitarian led crisis, which means the massive middle class or lower middle class that we stand on the shoulders of, blue collar workers that help us. When they crash, for sure it's a crash. It's gonna trickle down and multiply up to us. So what we're seeing right now with rich-poor discrepancy, with reverse globalization, are huge themes that I think as a community we need to look out for and find solutions to, and also invest wisely based on this.
No, thank you, Ilaria, for making that point. For the group of you, if you think about, we really do cover the region of Southeast Asia, East Asia, China, and of course South Asia. And Asia Pacific is so diverse. And as I think about one of the issues that has, come up with the COVID-19 is the issue of inequality. Not everyone is middle class, not everyone is upper middle class. And George, I think you're back earlier.
Can you hear me?
About this same issue of what happens when a country shuts down. And then as it reopens in China, the uses of apps, privacy issues have come up. But if you could just share with us your own experiences as in China, China has recovered from COVID-19. What is the technology that they're using, and does everyone have access to that technology to move forward?
Yeah, I think one of the issues we see in China is the migration of population and how the government's controlling that migration, controlling the spread of the virus. So in the beginning, Wuhan and Hubei province was essentially shut off from the rest of the country. As the country slowly opened up in early April, transfer of the virus. So technology has been adopted by the government, such as the Alipay app, which is essentially tracking your movement for residents. Every building that we go into, any public venue we go into, the first thing is they will ask to see your QR code, which essentially display green, yellow, or red. Essentially, if you're from Hubei or Wuhan area, you will display a red color. So they would know that those regions you've been traveled to. And this really raises a question on privacy, as you just discussed. Tracking population, who you've been interacted with, they're collecting voice data, they're collecting facial recognition data. So this is one area, while at this time it's helping the spread, stopping the spread, but it's also really getting a lot more personal information than people are comfortable with. And most of Chinese population today, I mean, smartphone is very well saturated, but the older generation, just their capability to download the app, be able to register themselves, and the difficulties around technology, that's probably where the frustrations and challenges have been. So you've seen people in subway stations where, grandma, grandpas want to go in the subway to take a ride and they need to show the QR code, which many of them don't probably use Alipay for their, e-commerce purchase as the younger generation do. So that's probably where the difficulties will come up.
Yeah, George, Ilaria, and Aditya, when they talk about the impact of COVID-19, one of the points that had come up was, is there an impact also on the fundraising side? I wanted to ask you for your firm, during this time, have you been trying to raise additional funds, or were you in the middle of investments? So all three of you are really working from home, as they say, and how has that part of the business been impacted? When you can't meet with people, you're doing your due diligence, you're trying to build that relationship. How has it played out for you?
Yeah. So I'll go first. For Aries, I mean, for our investment activity, it's been challenging in the first half. So we are not traveling. We have a firm-wide policy of not traveling. So, meeting companies and doing due diligence is added difficulties. I think this is start slowly to turn. And also I can see in my own portfolio companies where we've had deals that third party has performed due diligence before Chinese New Year, looking to close right after Chinese New Year, but that's all been pushed back. People were really looking to see March, April, May data to make their, the company has recuperated to last year levels. So probably out of 10 portfolio companies in our R&B fund, 3 companies has completed fundraising in the last month now. That's probably one stat you can use. I think the fundraising amounts have been reduced, where companies were able to raise 100 million RMB or 200 million RMB, probably those have been cut in half, if not more. So I think investors are cautious in terms of pacing the investment and amount of investment dollar-wise into the businesses. I think the second half, a lot of companies are now turning going over the hump of really playing defense, and I think have recuperated in terms of operations. So you're going to see a lot more activities in the second half. And now on the ground today, I think we're probably back to about 70–80% of normal business. For myself, I made my first business trip last week to taking a plane. So that's probably one sign.
And how was that, and where were you going?
I flew to Chengdu.
Okay.
The flights were full, but I think that's also a reason because there's less flights. So I think they're probably just making each flight, more populated. But so I think
so
the
a plane, just for us to picture it, a plane full of every seat full, everyone's in a mask, all the flight attendants are in a mask.
Yeah, so every seat is full. There's no food and drinks being served by flight attendants, so people all wear their masks. My plane ride was 3 hours, so I didn't really eat or drink anything. I just kept my mask on. There's probably half amount of flights to Chengdu. I go there pretty often, so there's less flights, but each flight is full.
No, I think, again, as China recovers first, maybe you'll also be an example of what we all have to face for all of us at Milken who are used to just flying around. And then those of, Ilaria and Aditya, I'll turn to you two next, because that you're not just one single huge market like China. Aditya, you're flying from Singapore to South Asia, maybe to Japan. Tell me, how have you and your colleagues dealt with this not being able to meet with people? How do you do your due diligence? How do you raise funds without those in-person meetings, or do you see that as part of a structural change? Earlier you had shared some thoughts about things that will change over the long term, whether it's supply chains or how we work from home. If you could share some thoughts, that'd be terrific.
I'll start with the funding topic. So first, if we look at the funnel of where investors get their money, limited partners, which would include companies like pension funds, etc., they are deploying less actively right now, and I think that people are trying to figure out what their flight to safety or to quality might be. So it's going to be very difficult for new funds in general, I think, to be raising. Now, at the fund level, so the one thing that's for sure is that, while there are opportunities that are presenting themselves from an investment perspective with COVID, I'd say largely across the board, investors are very unclear as to how things are going to play out. So because of that, and as Curtis was saying, while you are starting to see companies recover, they're still not fully there as to where they were before, and a lot of these businesses have significant fixed costs. So what we have seen since, I'd say, early February is venture capital and private equity firms, instead of investing as much time and dollars into new companies, they're reallocating a lot of those dollars to existing portfolio companies and making sure that the companies that didn't have 12 to 18 months to kind of weather the storm, to be able to recapitalize those companies such that they have more time and breathing room to be able to wait this out versus building new relationships with new businesses. Now, on the topic, but that said, there are still businesses that are being funded. So I invested, I didn't make any new investments in May, but we had one investment that we closed in March, one investment that we closed in April. And we're still looking at opportunities, but largely these will be with companies that we have been tracking for, maybe 6 months or more. So again, with people that we know, and typically investments don't happen over the course of just 1 week. Especially with thematic investors, these are companies that we have tracked and built relationships with for a very long time. And some of those companies happen to be raising now and ideally are benefiting from some of the tailwinds that COVID presents. So in such cases, we would make those investments. Finally, are there any structural changes to how investments are made? I don't think on the investing side per se, there will be any structural changes. I think that to a large extent, if there are businesses that are doing well, I mean, there's a saying in finance that if you can promise somebody an 8% return and you can consistently achieve that, you will always find a buyer. So as long as companies are able to show that, whether it's some degree of attractiveness or financial attractiveness for that matter, I think good businesses will be able to come out from this. And I think most importantly, it's a very exciting time to be playing in the private equity and venture capital space because so many people have been adversely impacted by this. The entrepreneurial spirit in a lot of markets is going to be significantly activated. So to Ilaria's point, when you look at, I'll give you an example. So versus the U.S., if you look at Indonesia, China, and India, 70% of Indonesia's retail market is unorganized. 80% of China's retail market is unorganized, and 97% of India's retail market is unorganized. And by unorganized, I'm referring to, in India, for example, when you see a mom and pop shop, traditionally known as kirana stores, these would count as unorganized retail stores. So you have a lot of micro entrepreneurs across all of these markets, which have now have to face and address significant financial adversity. So they will be looking to additional channels for them to unlock their growth. So there is obviously going to be an uptick in digital, but you're also going to start to see companies think of their business in different ways And the entrepreneurial spirit is generally going to be very active in South Asia. So I don't think any structural changes in terms of how we look at investments. Due diligence somehow will pick up, ideally with travel, but even without travel, it's still possible to do a lot of these things and understand what a business is doing and the people that run that business, but difficult times overall.
Yeah, indeed. I'm working on a project myself with the New Development Finance Corporation of the U.S., which will be the U.S. version, kind of like of the IFC or the private sector operations of the Asian Development Bank. And there they said, because they know me and my colleagues, that we're grandfathered in, but they cannot look at anything under the rules without visiting it, right? So those that they know about, per your point, maybe they can explore additional investment, but kind of like new things, everything is on hold for them. Earlier you had mentioned that one structural change that might happen is a supply chain shift in the region. You're very keen on South Asia. Any specific markets or specific kind of sectors that you might want to spotlight from South Asia? And then I want to turn to Ilaria, specific to Southeast Asia, as we think about the topic of this, of investment in Asia at this time.
So when we look at supply chains, there's always been, and this comes from fundamental economics, a benefit towards centralization. So whether it's food processing in the US, the fact that it's centered around just 5 to 6 large companies, whether it's the fact that you look at the semiconductor industry, or you look at manufacturing in general in China, a lot of these supply chains have been concentrated with larger players. But what comes with that large concentration is that these companies end up being brittle to the extent that they cannot withstand supply shocks and demand shocks that are outside of their model. So obviously, it makes sense. And while they're able to provide better prices, I think what COVID does present to people is understanding how much of your economics are you willing to sacrifice for flexibility. And flexibility is going to be on everyone's mind, I think, going forward. And through that flexibility, South Asia and Southeast Asia will likely be the greatest beneficiaries in the world, where you are starting to see manufacturing supply chains move away from China. India has already started benefiting from that change when you're looking at high-tech components assembly. And markets like Vietnam, which has already, now I think 4 weeks out of lockdown, has also started to move in that direction. So right now these are moves made by large companies that want to be more nimble in their supply chain, simply because they're so large that they have to be able to address some form of demand. The real question, and I think what would really demarcate whether this is a structural shift, is whether your medium-sized business also starts to look at this. So if your company that's doing $50 to $100 million starts to, instead of working with one manufacturer, work with 2 manufacturers, or at least be able to have a plan B in the first place. And if that mindset shift does happen, then we are up for benefiting from some serious tailwinds in both South Asia and Southeast Asia.
Thank you. Before I jump to Ilaria, just quickly, for South Asia, people always think India. And is that what your focus is, or are there unique opportunities elsewhere in the region, the Bangladeshis, the Nepals, the Pakistan, or is it all about India when people think
so? It's not all about India, absolutely not. So I think that when you look at, L'Oreal, for example, L'Oreal's largest manufacturing facility outside of I think Europe is in Indonesia. So one trend that existed before COVID was that people have started, especially in markets like Southeast Asia, where sure the middle class is growing, but discretionary spending is still not that high in absolute dollar amount. Consumers.
A quick interruption. But what about South Asia? Are there other markets in South Asia that you're focused on?
So in terms of investing, we're looking at markets like Bangladesh, like Pakistan, and the point that I was making with Indonesia is that every country is going to start to have a localized manufacturing base, whether it's before it used to be for cosmetics, but now you're going to start to see it for a lot more essential goods and for consumer non-discretionary. And as that base develops, I think economies are going to start to look a lot healthier. So we're generally seeing that trend across the board.
Okay, Ilaria, just before we open it up to some of the questions that have been coming in, I wanted to turn back to you. As you think about Southeast Asia, a similar question. Are there markets that are really coming to the forefront simply because of their size? Maybe it's in Indonesia, or are some of these trends that are taking place right now because of the pandemic, do you see continuing onward, or they'll continue more so in one market versus another? If you could share your thoughts on Southeast Asia and help people break it down as they think about investment opportunities in that part of Asia.
Yeah, thanks, Curtis. Maybe I'll start with a more macro thing because, you know, the 8 countries we operate in Southeast Asia, every country is a different animal, to be honest. So, you know, we can dig deeper, or frankly, like if people are interested, they can ping me separately. But from a regional perspective, right, I think that the pandemic, like I mentioned before, is a massive short circuit marketing event. It's forcing you to escalate the way you try and adopt a product. So normally in a peacetime day, if someone pings you and says, why don't you try to, like, you know, go from using cash to using, you know, payment wallet, or asking you to order groceries as opposed to going there, or asking if people are wealthy, have your driver, you kind of will think about it. So then you rely on promotions or, you know, circumstances to do it. But now everyone is forced to drive this adoption. And as many of you may or may not know, driving customer adoption is the most expensive thing that tech companies that are expanding are spending money on, right? Frankly, you know, ride hailing, why we were competing with Uber like crazy for a number of years, is we're trying to spend money to drive customer adoption, to bring them into your ecosystem. And then once they're in, we want to make sure that customer experience is so good that they stay with us, and we create other products that would make them stay on the platform. So having said that, right, now people are being forced to use it. Think about the convenience, especially structurally, from Asia. I mean, we're not like living in Brentwood, LA, where we just need to go downstairs to get a Starbucks, and hence, should we order because we're lazy or not? It's not that. Like in Indonesia, in Jakarta, just going one block, you can be stuck in traffic for 2 hours if you're during the peak hours, right? Because the whole road infrastructure is screwed up. So if you have never tried to order coffee via a food app, you'll be like, okay, I'm just used to going downstairs, walking, or, you know, maybe just not drinking coffee. But now that you've ordered it, you realize there's a motorcycle guy who can deliver it within half an hour, what you want. So you can bypass even, you know, the opportunity cost of leaving your office. Once you've used it, why not, right? In additional to that, of course, the contactless part of payments in fintech is a very important thing. It's not just during COVID when people don't touch each other because of disease. In Southeast Asia, actually, a lot of our robbery and murder are caused by cash. Because late at night, we literally had passengers attack driver because they know at the end of the day, the driver gets a lot of cash in their car. So we actually have a very strong motivation to motivate people to go cashless, to go onto our payment wallet for transparency, for credit history, for being able to track what's going on, for establishing for us, if they want to get loans from us, we have to have a record of seeing that, do they pay their bills on time, right? And also see how they make money. And for them, it is just much safer and much more convenient, and they earn points, and they also earn all these credit history that previously they were not on the map. So so things like fintech, like payment, like opening bank account is a no-brainer that the structural change from the accelerated adoption will last after virus. Food delivery as well, grocery delivery as well, if the experience is good, which is why companies like us, like you know, our competitors, even in the States, right, Instacart, everyone is trying to move up their game in the customer experience, their tech, everything. So I think those are very lasting changes that we will see that will come out of this crisis. I will also say things like healthcare. People have to look at healthcare if they are interested really in this region, because there's such a gap. There is like crazy stats. I'll give you two stats. Per 1,000 people in Southeast Asia, there's 1.2 doctors versus, you know, 1.5 global average, which is still pretty low, but they, you know, lumped in Latam and Africa. Per 1,000 people, there's 1.9 hospital beds, average of 4 hours travel time to a hospital for an average of 3 minutes to see a doctor. Now, because of products like our competitor Halo Doc, we launched Ping on Good Doctor in Indonesia. For not complicated diseases, you can just go on like this on Zoom, talk to your doctor, describe the symptoms, show them some of the symptoms, and then they'll diagnose you. And then within the same day, we will have delivery guys delivering medicine to you. Can you imagine, like, in a part of the world where 660 million people live in that, in these countries, with such a huge rich-poor discrepancy, to the extent that rich Indonesians would fly helicopters to Singapore to get treated because they don't trust their own system, the amount of upside structurally in things like healthcare. Again, COVID just turbocharges people's awareness of the need of this. So companies like us will ramp up the customer experience, our tech platform, the whole, just how much resources we dedicated to growing these business. From a consumer standpoint, they are just learning how to use it, learning how to, you know, register, link their bank accounts, and do that instead of going analog. I think all those things have very, very much lasting impact post-virus.
And is there one or two specific markets in Indonesia or in Southeast Asia that you would flag for potential investors? You know, like I was asking Adit, you know, South Asia is more than India, and he talked about, well, they're actually looking at things in Bangladesh and else. Are you exploring things in the markets like Myanmar or Laos, or those still
Sure.
very frontier for you all?
Yeah, I think as an investor, like, i.e. you're, you know, investing your own money or someone else's money, of course, people still focus on Indonesia because it's the largest country, and hence there's a lot more maturity versus others, and liquidity, which is the most important thing. But I personally love Vietnam. I think that Vietnam is a mini China in many ways. People are extremely hardworking. Very young population, shocking statistics, right? Like 70% of the people are like 35 years old or under. Even their older generation is kind of like in their 50s or so, right? All the chairmen of Vingroup and all the largest conglomerates, and they were educated in Russia, came back, very nationalistic, want to help their own country. And the spending habit of young people in Vietnam too, they're very savvy. I mean, you go to Saigon, like these kids are like maxing out their credit cards, like nightclubs are booming every single night. So I think that people also have a very huge self-improvement mentality. I've gone on some ethnographies, i.e. like, you know, I go take a car for 3 hours, go to the village and kind of spend a whole day interviewing people there and ask them how they spend, how they live, what do they think. And I go into these houses and they're these like 20-year-olds who have all these things that they posted on the wallpaper, self-improvement words, self-improvement quotes from people they love. And that is the spirit, whereas I don't see it throughout the rest of Asia, Southeast Asia, sorry. So I think people know that. So you see actually top Korean companies like Lotte and them, they have already gone into Vietnam ahead of the curve and really, you know, wanting to invest there. I think the barrier to entry though is that it's become more and more nationalistic, Vietnam, even more so than some other countries. So you have to gain the trust of locals. But I'm bullish. Now, Philippines, you know, is another place that I actually love because there has been a lot of growth. However, I think the government part is very tricky. And from my own anecdotal experience with the government, I've been talking to some ex-ministers on COVID response, especially in the economic alleviation way. It's just super inefficient. You know, 3 weeks ago, I talked to an ex-social minister and I was told that 98% of the stimulus money was still stuck on regional and local government levels. That's very unacceptable for a country where most people don't have food to put on the table. And what is super ironic, and I'll end my current point on that, is this minister literally just called up like 10 of the, you know, richest families in Philippines and says, donate some money, let's procure some food and all of that, and then just send it to these families to hold them over for the week. Normally, aid food means canned spam, you know, like expired bread and really bad quality rice, right? But this crisis, because the whole supply chain has kind of broken down, she was able to procure like fresh chicken, fresh corn, meat from like the farms outside of Manila. And then all she needs to do is to coordinate the delivery and bring it to these people who are in, you know, these people who are in need of food. And you think, what's going on here? What's going on here is there's a massive breakdown in supply chain, massive breakdown in government efficiency, and the private sector is able to step in, and all it takes is just a few effective people to get it done. So I would say if you want to invest in countries like Philippines or frankly like Cambodia, etc., you got to really be in the country and you got to know people so that you don't miss out on what's really going on. Yeah, I'll end there.
Or have a firm with people many of you know that I lived in the Philippines for 4 years when I was at the Asian Development Bank. I have a weekly call with, I think one of those people, one of those 50 is on my call every Wednesday, discussing about, what they all are trying to do to help. But in a way, how sad it is that they are the ones that have to do this. So, it's I think a separate discussion about that. Again, the challenges and what is right or wrong when it comes to a more authoritarian model versus a more liberal model, and what works best at what time. I want to turn now to a couple questions that have come in. Let me just pick out 3 to make sure we hit a couple, and then we'll figure out who to direct them to. One will clearly be for George, because that's specifically to George. Given your firm's distressed focus, we wondered if you could talk about distressed, in other words, distressed land in China. So I guess the issue of real estate. And how is the distressed market there different than, say, in the US? So that's one question. Another question for the group, although maybe we answered a little bit, is how do you see these changes in consumer behavior now taking place? Will they continue once the pandemic is passed? I think, Ilaria, you actually already touched on that. And then one question specifically addressed to Adit and Ilaria. Could you quantify how much of a tailwind COVID has been for specifically your food delivery and mobile payments business in Asia? And would you say competition between you two, Grab versus Gojek, has intensified or gotten a bit more muted due to COVID? So let's do George first with that question about distressed market land, and then do the one with Gojek versus Grab.
Yeah, I'll touch upon a little bit. I think obviously by Aries management background in the US market, we're a distressed investor and distressed for control. But in China, for the last decade that I've set up shop here, we've been mainly still focused on domestic consumption upgrade, mainly on growth stories, right? So we're looking at the better part of the business. I think that makes sense where China is at and the consumer base. So a lot of our investments is still on, new demand and new habits and new kind of customer looking to better their lives. So that could be in healthcare, that could be in pet products. So we've been making investment in this front. But with that said, Aries actually just made an acquisition of a GP, SSG Capital. It's a Pan-Asia credit investor, and that is a business that we've acquired looking really in this part of the world to extend our distressed investment business. So the NPL markets in China. And they're investor across, India, Indonesia, China, and rest of North Asia. So that's probably mainly the new growth area for us and looking to develop that part of the business. But for my business here in China, I think China is still, it's in a growth stage. So we're looking still for the business that's going to make, 2-3 times growth per year annual. And you're still able to find those opportunities here. I think this is really trying to leverage what we see in the Western world, where markets have developed in terms of, adoption and penetration into different sectors, and how that's, in 10 years time, China can repeat that cycle of development. And that's the type of opportunities we're looking for.
Thank you. Ilaria, maybe you first. What about your views on dealing with competitors? Let's say Grab versus Gojek. How has COVID-19 impacted that part of any business, the competition?
So I won't touch on the ride-hailing business. Both Grab and Gojek are super apps. The ride-hailing business is fairly obvious. People have covered competition there. So when you look at Southeast Asia, so when you look at the Philippines, you look at Indonesia, you look at Malaysia, these are countries that are in the top 10 when it comes to time spent online, right? So there's been a dark horse trend that's been developing over the past 5 years, which is known as social commerce. So people are actually using Instagram and WhatsApp to be able to conduct business online. Now, given that Grab and Gojek, when you sign up to work with our platforms, there is a charge and a commission that these merchants have to pay. A lot of these users, so instead of talking about competition between us, the real competition is actually now companies like Facebook and Google, which are actually now providing tools to empower these merchants. So Facebook only just 2 weeks ago launched Facebook Shop, which is a suite of business tools to allow people to sell on Facebook and WhatsApp more easily. So I'm not sure if any of you have used any food delivery service or something else that wasn't in Gojek or in Grab, but rather through WhatsApp, right? And you can scan a QR code and get payments done, and typically on more favorable terms for the merchant. So obviously they're not able to get as much demand as they would if they were inside of the Grab and Gojek platforms. They still have to use their own CRM, activate their own customer base. But the large trend is that. So Google and Facebook are actually the larger competitors that are now coming into the space. And the final point in terms of whether this kind of consumer behavior, so a lot of people have been activated because of this market, because of this trend. But it's important to remember the technology adoption bell curve. So it's a bell curve which is separated by the early adopters, the early majority, late majority, laggards. And each of these groups is distinguished based on their familiarity with technology. So what's important to note is that while COVID has forced people in terms of forced people along where they are on that journey, a lot of these products haven't changed. So, and because the products haven't changed, they're now selling these products to people that are not as technologically savvy. So if you noticed with Zoom, as soon as Zoom opened up their platform for free for educators, their ratings tanked on the Android store because it just wasn't their target audience. But the same thing applies to Grab and Gojek. If we don't simplify our products now, and very quickly for this older population or less savvy population that's now using the platform, then a lot of this usage that we're seeing is going to disappear. So it's incumbent on us to make sure that we can also improve the experience to keep these guys that we've acquired, fortunately, on the platform going forward.
Thank you, Aditya. Ilaria? So again, the question that had come in was about because of COVID, is some of the competition, say specifically between the Grab, in the Grab Gojek world, has that been muted somewhat?
Yeah, I'll comment a bit on that and maybe also answer what you mentioned about kind of the question quantifying COVID tailwind for food and payments, because I think that's important. I really think that in wartime, especially I mentioned a supply constrained market, you actually you're too busy trying to make sure your ship's not sinking than to keep your eyes on your competitor. So for sure for us, for Grab, like the word Gojek hasn't really like appeared in our minds when the crisis hits. It's much more about like, how do we take care of our delivery partners, merchants, our employees, like how many senior management people have to take pay cuts in order to make sure that we don't fire anyone? How do we get our own employees to donate benefits and money to make sure that, our driver partners or delivery guys who have COVID or lost jobs because of it can hold over, because they are the people who we tried for years to onboard and train, and they are our biggest asset. So frankly, we just have no headspace to think about competition. And in many ways, I'm sure Gojek would agree too, is that the drop in transportation, but the upsurge in food and delivery, which were both in all those verticals, we have to make sure that we are responding to the demand and we're delivering good service. And I think, for all of us, we struggle. If Amazon struggles, we for sure have a long way to go to make sure that the experience is as seamless as possible for customers. So to answer your question, actually, just the thought of competition has really not been at the forefront of our minds. However, of course, there's one area that we always compete in is path to profitability. And the COVID crisis has made it more clear than ever that is not a path to profitability. It's a sprint to profitability. And that has dramatically changed the tech landscape pre and post COVID, right? When kind of money was growing on trees and everyone loves tech, people can just afford the luxury to just keep fundraising and growing because people are so optimistic about the sector. Now, it's all about profits, and we have to actually think about how to be disciplined as if this money in our bank is our last check. And that's for sure what we've been doing to make sure we manage our costs. I can't share a lot of figures to you, Rob, but I will tell you that, for example, for our food, the tailwind has helped us had a 320% year-on-year growth for our food business. And of course, the increase in consumer demand, also moves over to the increased demand for restaurants to be onboarded to our GrabFood platform. Now, I know that Curtis mentioned, and you guys must have noticed, there's also this kind of war and tension between restaurants wanting to cut out delivery apps like us, and they want direct people, which is totally fine, right? It's different kinds of people who are getting employment. We are supporting a lot of delivery people in that gig economy. For them, they want to keep the business there to not let platform companies like us take a cut. But in many ways, because the whole supply chain and the whole organizing of resources is being reorganized, merchants actually realize that all their idle capacity, what is the best scenario for them? And for a lot of restaurants, it is really to onboard to a platform like us, where we have coordinate and we throw in demand, and all they need to do is to worry about making the food and sending it out and have a steady volume of business. So for food, I really think that, for sure that tailwind will carry in to post-COVID virus, even though there will be a bit of correction. As for payments, of course, there's decline in a lot of off-platform payments from retail, et cetera, and also from transport. But we also see a massive uptick based on e-commerce sales and essential sales from our payments volume from our wallets. And I don't know if you know, for our wallet and OVO in Indonesia, we also have a partnership with Tokopedia. So a lot of Tokopedia sales volume is come through our OVO wallet. So we definitely saw a huge uptake in e-commerce. We do probably there may be a bit of a moderation, but I think that the convenience of e-commerce will carry over. I will make a last comment that is not relevant to, especially to Grab, but I think that overall, I was on a call with Goldman Sachs a few weeks ago, and their CIO and their head of treasury have made this comment, is even banks like Goldman Sachs, who normally spend millions on making sure their infrastructure is good, they realize that this COVID thing broke out, that a lot of their procedure and handling systems are still analog and still manual. And they were just too lazy to change, or they don't want to fire people. There's a lag. And they realized this crisis has escalated for them to even further digitize. I was on the phone 2 days ago with the head of wealth management of UBS in Hong Kong. And I asked her, oh, so how long have you been working from home? And she's like, not a single day. So this whole crisis, she has been going to work every single day because UBS's system wasn't sophisticated enough, in her opinion, to warrant senior people to stay at home every day. So guess what? I bet you UBS will be spending a lot of money to, upgrade all of their remote work from home technology from here. So you can imagine and think what it means, both for work from home, but for all these enterprise softwares, but for digitization and how it affects the labor market as well. For transportation. Oh, sorry. Yes.
I just say thank you. Larry, we always try to keep these right on schedule.
Yeah.
But I think all three, I don't know if George is still with us, but all three of you have made very clear that in this crazy world of ours, it's not just COVID-19, it's what countries have done to respond to COVID-19 and what that's meant for local economies. And then very more clearly here in the US, the impact of all that with the combination of inequality and inequity. It's like a perfect storm of things happening. But despite all this, very clearly, at least when it comes to Asia, each of you have flagged the opportunities that still exist. All of us are adjusting, working from home, doing these calls from home. But again, each of you have also identified opportunities for people to invest, even as we sprint to make sure we're making some money in this crazy world of ours. I want to wrap by simply just turning it over to Andy, and from my part of the Zoom world in Virginia, thank you for joining us. Andy, take it away.
Thank you, Curtis, and thank you to our fantastic panelists today for facilitating such an insightful conversation. If you did not get your questions answered today or have any follow-up, please send me an email, and I'm happy to connect you with the appropriate speaker from the panel. Before we leave, I just wanted to quickly note that this June, the Milken Institute is hosting the Summer Series, which will convene leaders in finance, health, philanthropy, and policy to discuss a world undergoing astonishing change. I really hope you all can join us for this week, which will be entirely virtual and feature high-level panel discussions, fireside chats, and private breakouts focused on actionable insights into how the pandemic is reshaping our reality, with a particular emphasis on working together to create a brighter post-crisis world. If you'd like more information on this event, please reach out to myself, and I'm happy to further discuss. And with that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. And as always, please continue to stay safe and healthy.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.